Hey guys, it's Balding here and welcome to another video. And this time we will be talking about our new tier list. This is our third version, and as per usual, I'm also joined by Darksigner. Hello Darksigner.
Hello guys, I'm back again to talk about our tier list updates that we have for the Duel Masters TCG.
Yeah, and as you guys can see, we already set up our previous tier list, so we won't go through like every deck one by one in detail and just go like through the changes we made. And I think there are um, quite a lot of changes. There went some time by because our last tier list was already like made 1 year before, and we uploaded it like a year later. So there's quite a time difference between these two lists, although the upload might be a bit more soonish. So I think we can jump right into the list, and we still have our tier 1, 1.5, 2, and 3, so nothing changed there. But right from the start, we will start in tier 3 and work up to the top. And right from the start, we have two changes in the Steinoid deck and in the Armorloid deck. We will remove both decks from the tier list into like tier,
Everything else.
yeah, into tier everything else, because we don't see anyone like using these decks in our tournaments. They have fallen off the radar quite a lot. I'm not even sure if like Starnoid was even played at all like in the last year or so. Maybe at the start of IDC there were some Starnoid decks. There were definitely some Armorloid decks, but still we don't see any of them represented at all.
Yeah, they have been completely phased out. I think like Starnoid occasionally sees some play, but like some play in like one guy plays it in like a whole cycle, like in half a year or even a
Yeah.
year, and that's not much. There's not really we talked about it, I think, in one of the earlier tier list versions that like Lightwater Elzonis is just like the deck but better. So
Yeah.
like competitively speaking, there's no reason to play it. If people pick it, it's just because they think Starnard is cool and they want to play it. And I think the same goes for Armorloids. Like rub Armorloids is basically like rub control with flavor, not really a competitive edge. And uh, we have seen some like ruby lists or like red, black, yellow lists
Mm,
at some point, but also not really. They didn't really do anything.
yeah. Yeah. And next up we have our two to three color aggro shells represented by Cook Pollen and Lucia Lex. And we have also one change there in that we will switch the Hydrus um, back in the tier list and will integrate it into the 2 and 3 color aggro shells. Um, we also had the Water Darkness, like tempo or aggro version in general, represented by the Crystal Paladin, and that's why we made a new template. But it's not in the tier 3, it will be somewhere else. So be excited for that where this ends up. So the Water Darkness is definitely not something we would include into the two color aggro shells at the bottom of tier 3. That's why we have a separate image for that, but still nothing is changing there. The light, fire, nature aggro, all the other aggros which are not like represented here are being displayed like in this shell, and yeah, nothing is pretty much changed there. And basically every uh, on not every but most decks at tier 3 are just like worse versions from other decks, like again the 2 or 3 color aggro shell, again just worse version like of Rug aggro, for example.
Yeah, I
um,
can't add anything more to the
yeah.
point.
Yeah, next
Let's
up,
move on.
rush shells, some like light nature rush, like Fire Darkness Rush, I think we saw in some in one of the last IDCs, but still nothing groundbreaking. So again, it stays like at the bottom of tier 3. I think we can go over like this pretty quickly. Next up, we don't have the Grub Shell. We have a new tier 3 deck, and I'm sad to announce it, but it's true. It's Merino. It's going down. Again, just the worst version of Hydro Hurricane. Um, Still, you can play it with Initiate or with Guardians. Most likely, when we talk about Merino, it's with Initiates, but it's not like a deck which performs really well in this current meta game.
Yeah, we have seen like Merino deck out from Xboom, but the problem is like with the namesake like deck out, we already have Ruby deck out, which performs way better. So
Yeah,
again, the argument it's just like a worse version of an existing tier 2 deck.
yeah, yeah. And again, not really, the representation is also not really there. And when we talk about like Merino mid-range, we always like compare it to like um, the old school deck, which like gatekeeps tier 3 decks together with also Rub mid-range, and this is
Yeah.
why, and or Rub control, and this is why we also move down the Rub shells, Rub mid-range, and Rub control right into the tier 3. It's not tier 0 Tom Rogers list, but yeah, I think we saw Banila, who finished in top 8, so had quite a bit of a showing with this deck, but still we don't see it to be represented that much. I think we saw some Chimera, like Rub Chimera,
Yeah,
even doing well,
recently. Yeah.
yeah, recently. Um, but still, I don't think that it's a deck to stay, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So next up we have, yeah, the Grub Shell, Grub Midrange, Grub Control, represented by the two Miraculous spells. It stays here top of tier 3. I think we don't have seen that many representations. I think Mr. De La Serna played the deck once in an IDC. I still would like more people to pick up the Grub mid-range version. I'm sure like Sasu already has a version of it and plays with it like in real life, for example, but he's not someone who's like attending IDC regularly. Would like him to bring this deck to IDC. Maybe Otto has a version of it, but Otto is more like on the survivor train at the moment. Yeah, so we could have some players who are playing this deck, but they opt to like yeah play something else. So that's why it like doesn't change at the moment.
Yeah, also like people with that color combination tend to play like turbo mana burn versions and not like traditional control mid-range whatever decks, like not I think the best version of like this deck type is like good stuff deck and not
Mm,
like turbo burn. And that's also something that holds the deck back. Yeah.
yeah, true. Yeah, I think uh, Nasus is or Seiryu is someone who's playing like the turbo version with the grub colors in
Yeah.
IDC, but
Rebent so into plague.
yeah, the the dream curve, but still not getting top eights at all. Yeah, and that's it for tier 3. And this means this is like the light, water, darkness, nature shell, which is so either some fortress version or some ice sword version with the namesake cards Sky Sword and Ice Vapor. It's also represented in the shell, and this moves up to not the bottom of tier 2, but it moves into tier 2 So we will move it up there, and we will continue with the bottom of tier 2, and this is Wave Striker. Wave Striker moved down a bit because, again, no representation, and it's like the new gatekeeper of tier 3 decks, because if you don't have like I mean, it's not quite like FN Rush that you need to respect it at all, but if you don't come like really prepared and like answering your opponent's wave strikers early on, and the third wave striker gets down and you don't do anything about it, game is just over. So there are some situations where you can plague multiple times, even through like 3 or 4 wave strikers. But as soon as like they get to like untap with three wave strikers on board and can continue playing some turnips, for example, it gets really difficult for you to come back. But again, representation is quite slim, so that's why we moved it down in tier 2.
Yeah, I think it has some of like the Phobos syndrome, I would say, like probably even more,
Mm,
in my opinion. That like you have a quite like decent matchup versus everything. It deals with everything pretty well, but like the two best decks, like Fortress and Fire Nature Rush, are like just too much for it. Like it's not equipped enough to deal with Fire Nature Rush. Like Fire Nature Rush is
yeah,
too fast for it, and Fortress Burn or like Deck Out, some really hard control decks are just too good at removing your game plan. So that's what's holding you back. But like everything in between, like in tier 2, if it just battled like other tier 2 decks, it would
mm,
actually be pretty good.
yeah. Yeah, maybe except like Ruby, but yeah,
Yeah,
still
yeah.
it still has a good time also against Alzunius, I would say.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
and even it depends on like the Fortress lists, but and how fast they can
Yeah,
turbo out
yeah,
their plague. If they like need more time or don't see like double ramp, then yeah, it's also really great. But again, if a rush matchup is just so horrible, and they can
yeah.
like remove your wave striker with volcanic arrows, and you never get to play your third one. Um, so next up we have Lightwater Nature Alcadeas, or Lightwater Nature Tribal, represented by Petrova here. Um, I think we saw Ras playing Alcadeas in IDC in the last or second to last IDC, but still no one's really like playing this deck, and um, yeah, if it continues like that, maybe the decks who are not being played will drop down even more, because the theory is if a deck is good, then it's being played, and if a deck is not being played, it's not good. You can, of course, there's like some exceptions and so on. The deck might be like too complicated or complex that no new player is picking up the deck. Maybe like this would be a case for Guap midrange, for example, but or midrange decks in general, they are
Mm.
not like easy to play. But here with the Lightwater Nature, Alcadeas Tribal, yeah, we just don't see the representation. In theory, it's really good against like FN Rush with the Sky Sword with like Emerald and Surfer and so on, what the deck is playing, and also against Fortress when Alcadeas resolves. Fortress can't do that much except if it's not playing Spy Brigade and Surfer instead, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
against the rest, it's like, yeah, not that good. It like dies to Sing Wave, for example, but
yeah,
hmm,
yeah. Really, again, like the Phobos syndrome or like Wave Striker syndrome, like, but not like there. It's the other way around, like the opposite. Like it wins. It has a good matchup into like the two best decks, but then if you face anything in the middle, like other mid-range decks that play like Fire Board Vibes or something like that, or
yeah,
like just like uh, some bounce tempo could be a problem. Like, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's not as well rounded as the best decks. It's very good against a few specific decks, but
Mm,
also like
yeah,
bad versus specific decks.
yeah, yeah. That's a good way to describe it. Next, we have the Boogie Shell, the Lightwater Darkness Nature Shell. Um, yeah, we we think that again it's really good against Fortress, which is really popular at the moment. It's also good versus Rush, which is popular at the moment. It dies to mass removal,
Yeah.
but Stingwave is not played that much at the moment because Ruck is not being played that much, and some mid-range decks like Rub mid-range and so on. Rub mid-range is not being played that much, so Stingwave nowhere to be seen. But Blizzard of Spears from Ruby deck out, pretty devastating. That's why it's not like higher in the list, and pretty much the same argument with the Alcadeas, which dies to like Stingwave Blizzard, goes for the Ice Sword, for example.
Yeah, yeah, I agree
Yeah,
completely. I think we can move on. Like it's the same thing like with Alcadeas, just that it is like not as specific on like getting your Evo out. It's more generic, so
yeah.
that's why it's a bit above.
And also what we saw some Bonanza decks being played in the last IDCs, some 60 card versions, also some 5 color versions with Bonanza in it, and some invincible spells. Which try to counter like the Fortress Shell. So if you resolve Bonanza, then Fortress Shell can like, yeah, not do their game plan. But if they Fortress you or mana burn you first before you get to 8 mana, before you get to resolve Mana Bonanza, you're just playing a worse version of Fortress. So it's like a gamble. Do you like resolve your Mana Bonanza, then you win. If not, you lose. It's like pretty
Yeah.
win or lose situation. But yeah, that's why it's like in tier 2 and have been moving up, because it sees the shell in itself is seeing some play, not only Ice Sword but all the Light Water Darkness nature shell in general. So next up we have a new deck, and this is Light Darkness Nature Control, popularized by Xboom. Um, and we took the Fortress, Shell, and Icas for it because we saw some games, even on live stream, where he locked the opponent's FN Rush deck with Icas and Petrova. And this is like the only deck I think out of the whole decks on the tier list which is playing Icas. So that's why we thought it's a good card to represent the deck type, the Light Darkness Nature
Yeah,
control deck.
it's a very good mascot.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
definitely. And if you have like a two card like instant win combo against FN Rush, which is like maybe the most popular deck at the moment, then it's really good. And the thing that holds the deck back and it's not like higher in the tier list is that like only one player is playing the deck, um, and it's like a really good player, maybe the best player of our tournament scene at the moment, but still only one player can't like push the deck into tier 1 for in my
yeah.
opinion. um, so that's why it's like not higher in the tier list, even though it has every time he has played it, he went to top 8 or third, second, won with it. um, but yeah, still nobody's picking up the deck. I'm not sure why.
I mean, on surface level, it just looks like worse Fortress Shell
Mm,
because you miss like the water cards,
yeah,
and that screams like consistency loss. But then, like the trade-off is it's more robust against FN Rush because you have the E-Cuts combo and generally like more space for like anti-aggro stuff.
yeah,
Then
mm,
like it's just a matter like if you see the anti-control stuff in the, like if you see the right cards in the right matchups, it's probably a better pick. But like just looking at it on paper, it seems like a bit less consistent
mm,
deck. But yeah, if that is true or not, I don't know.
yeah,
And I don't have much experience with it myself.
yeah. Mm. So next up we have our new template with Spin Slicer and Crystal Paladin. And this is also a shell, but only a small shell. It's Water X aggro, and um, it's Water Fire, Water Darkness, and Water Nature aggro together in like one picture. So we can take the Water Nature template, which was represented by Pinsir out, and it will be integrated into the Water X aggro. And we put the Water X aggro out of the 2 and 3 color aggro shell because we see Water Fire, Water Darkness, and Water Nature aggro perform regularly and have some good results with it. Water Darkness aggro being popularized by Claude Alpha, and Water Fire aggro being played by Pittigman to a CIDC win, for example, and also Coil is playing the deck, for example. So and Water Darkness aggro, there are also some um, other people who are playing deck. Not sure like the names of them, but they are picking up those decks and are playing them, and we see them regularly in top 8, and that's why we took them out and put it like in the middle of tier 2.
Yeah, I think like especially like Water Darkness and Water Fire are performing very well with like they have multiple IDC wins and both have like Water Fire has a CIDC win
Yeah,
and Water Darkness has like 2 regular IDC wins and Water Fire has another regular win. Like they showed that they can win like multiple times and they perform regularly. Water Nature, I mean, it doesn't perform as good as those two, but I think like in theory, the deck has like close to the potential that the other two have.
yeah,
And just people haven't like experimented much with it. Like that deck is basically only like Make and Anna are the only two
mm,
guys that play it, and yeah, doesn't have a win yet, but uh, definitely a possibility that the deck can yeah pull it out. Like I mean, it has a win with Pinsir, like
yeah,
with Darkness, but like pure Water Nature doesn't have a win yet.
yeah. And I think it's quite underplayed in my opinion. I think it's a really strong deck, like with the 8 one drops and then card draw, ramp. You have pretty much everything. You have removal, you have shield triggers. I think you have um, like on paper again it looks good, but no one is like picking it up. And Maka has, I think, changed. He's a changed man. He's playing Ruby deck out. So the Pinsir fans are losing like one of their best representatives. But yeah, I still think it has really good potential, and that's why it's like in these Water X aggro shell. And what we don't include here is like Water Light aggro, because Water Light is like no one is playing that, so it's only like Water Fire, Water Darkness, and also only
Yeah,
Fire, Darkness, and Nature, but not
Water
Water
Light
Light.
is just like not like all these Water X aggro decks that we group together here are like borderline rush decks. Like
Hmm.
they are not as fast as Fire Nature Rush, but like they are closer to FN Rush than they are like to something like Rug Aggro.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and that's their strength. It's not saying like that's a bad thing.
yeah.
That they're like just close, slightly worse versions of Fire Nature Rush. And that's why like Water Light can't do that. Like maybe like you have Talc, but
Hmm.
like that's not good. Like if you play Water Light, you go more in the direction of like a middle ground slow aggro with like Elsonius, which we have like slightly above.
Yeah, yeah. So next up we have Survivor here, at the top of tier 2. Survivor definitely some kind of reincarnation, I would say. Like the Darkness Fire Nature version has been dropped in favor of the Light Darkness Fire Nature version. Um, Otto and me are playing, have been playing this deck, and to pretty good results. And I think the strength of adding light into like the Survivor deck is definitely Skysword, because Survivor has struggles against Rush, and in the past has been relying on the shield triggers like Burst Shot, Terror Pit, and so on to fend them off, but wasn't like fast enough to finish the game quickly before the opponent has like the chance to get some multiple speed attackers, for example. So it could even kill like through some shield triggers. And with light and with Skysword, you add like more shields, you add more time, you add more shield triggers, so you can like survive the opponent's rushing and have enough time to win the game. And yeah, you also get some benefits like Phobos, for example, like Petrova, like Holy Ore, so you got really good cards there to complement like the light section. But it gets more difficult to build the deck in itself, because by adding all these light cards, you have to cut like somewhere, or you are playing some kind of four boss survivor, I would say, which
Yeah,
Otto has been
yeah,
done also. But I think, in my opinion, the way to go is like stick as close to 40 as possible to see like your best opening the Brossam tribe into Soul Swap for Factory Shell on turn 4 most of the time. So yeah.
yeah. I think almost everything has been said by you. I think Survivor is still like the advantage it has, like and always has had, is like that it beats Control just by outgrinding infinitely with like the Grave Worms.
Hmm.
And yeah, the only problem is like surviving Rush, and at this point in time you just can't do it without Sky Swords, so you have to incorporate them, and then like you said, still somehow stay under 50, or like just hope it's your day and see all your good stuff in
Yeah.
50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe the Darkness Fire Nature will also get some love again, some renaissance, like maybe with yeah some ultra consistent turn 4 factory shells with, or maybe turn 5 factory shells with like adding slash charger, adding like, and the rest just like totally anti-aggro for burst shot, some meltdown maybe, whatever. But not sure if anyone is picking up the deck again when the version with light exists. Not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, Next up we have two shells again, and they stay the same, Grip Shell and Ruby Shell. They didn't move regarding the last tier list. I think after Ruby Deckout 1, there were some people who were screaming Ruby should be in tier 1.5, but I still think it needs some, not it needs something to be up there. I think the Deckout, I think you can describe it best. That Deckout is just like too passive and can be like, you can lose even if the opponent's like on two cards left in
Yeah.
the deck, then you can still like lose the game. You have like no alternative. Either you, and that's why we also see like the top 8 players, for example, which maybe pick up the deck and are not so experienced with it, um, that the time is like an issue in the top 8 group stage. You only have 50 minutes to finish your game, and if you are like 1-0 down, you have no chance to win the
Yeah.
game anymore. You can draw at best, and that's maybe also something that's keeping the deck a bit out of like the
Yeah.
tier 1.
The issue is that it has like not the greatest matchups into tier 1 decks. It's like it's better than like the stuff that comes after it. Like it's definitely like the best tier 2 deck and beats everything below, but against the top decks, I think even like I think your quote unquote best matchup, like against aggro, like Fire Nature Rush and Rug aggro, you're also not like safe.
Hmm.
And then like I think Fortress is just like an auto win. Like
Yeah.
maybe if deck out techs in like Maka did like 3 vapors or 4 vapors, then you can somehow win the
No.
matchup, but otherwise I think it's doomed. And then like yeah, you beat maybe. I think you have a good chance at like the non-nature decks in tier 1, like Hydro Hurricane and Azonius.
Mm.
But I think yeah, not looking too great into the rest when you look a bit above.
Yeah, and even like the aggro matchups, which are supposed to be good because you have so many removal, um, can be a problem because you trade like most of the time against drug aggro, for example, 1-for-1, you snare their Gonta, you, I don't know, have a shield trigger Terror Pit on something, maybe you get like a good Blizzard off, but then comes Lucky Ball and they are like +2, for example, and you play maybe like Stream and are +1, but used mana for it, can't do anything else, for example, and if you exchange further and further, then the worse it gets until like the opponent is totally out of gas. But usually, if they are playing like 4 Lucky Ball, you will have some difficult like to remove the board over and over and over because they just keep replaying all their stuff, keep drawing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the Grip Shell, we saw like Grave Corps, for example, be in top 4, also with Grip Shell, which complements the Rias engine, not focusing on Phobos, but on Rias. Even like without Rebirth, I think he's been playing. And also maybe in the future, if like the Survivor will always also play like Grip, maybe these two will merge like together, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
and we can move the Survivor into the Grip Shell, for example, because they are near to each other and they both play the same color combination. And as we saw, like Otto has played a mix out of like Grip Phobos and like Grip Survivor, so maybe these two will merge. But from now on, these stay side by side. So
So
let's,
finally,
yeah,
time for
yeah,
better decks, tier
yeah, time for the bit.
1.5.
I mean, yeah, the decks here are not bad, but there's definitely a difference between each of the tiers, and that's why we also made like a 0.5 tier here between 2 and 1, because there's again between 1.5 and 1 again a small step, even if it's not like that huge, but there is a noticeable step between them. Um, so yeah, let's move on to the next deck here, and these two Lightwater Elzonus and Drag Aggro have switched places. Drag Aggro is moving down a spot um, because we didn't really see that many players with we always like I think in pretty much every IDC there are like 1 or 2 players on the deck, but still like the high was when X-Boom won like with the Rebirth version of Ruck, and then suddenly like most people picked up the deck, and even I think Earth Power or CVH, one of the two, picked up the deck, also played it for a couple of IDCs. But I think like the hype, quote unquote, has moved down a bit, but still it's not like because the deck is bad, but maybe they moved into like other things, and that's why it moved like down a
Yeah.
slot. Yeah.
I have also one like additional reason why we decided to change those two places. Just FN Rush became even more popular
Hmm.
and better, and like if that's like getting more popular, then Azonius is the better pick into it, because like Rug, if you don't see Surfer in the first few shields, you ain't
Yeah.
winning. You're just
Yeah.
slower than Rush, and
Yeah.
Azonius is basically like built to beat Rush, while also having like the one big win con that tries to solo controls, which it definitely has a hard time doing nowadays with
Yeah.
Sky Swap control, but like still, uh, yeah, the main strategy of the deck is pretty simple: beat Rush and other aggros, and then yeah, like Elzonius tries to solo win versus control.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is, like, many people are not seeing, not many, but some people might not see Ruck in like the tier 1, tier 1.5 anymore. But I think the Ruck deck has that many flex slots that can be included. You can include like Scarlet Skyterror, for example, or the Galglyph Dragon. If like Ruby or Hydro Hurricane gets more popular, it can add like more speed attackers. If like control decks or Fortress in general gets more popular, it can add like more shield triggers with FN Rush and so on. But I think it can adapt really well to current metagame, and that's why I think it will always be one of the top like contenders. And with Alzinius, you still have the option to go with nature, although it's maybe not the better version, but it definitely helps against like control decks like turn 4 Alzinius, still pretty strong. Control decks can't really deal with that, and even then the sky swapping becomes difficult if Alzinius will hit down like a turn earlier. And also if you implement like you get access to Soul Swap, and then you can access the Murfolk engine, for example, can redraw, which is also good against control. You get Sky Sword, which is good against Rush, and so on. So I think also the deck has some still potential, maybe some unknown potential. So that's why it's also staying like on top here. Yeah, so only 4 decks left, and
Yeah.
next up might be a surprise for you, but it is Phobos, and Phobos is moving down out of tier 1 into 1.5. And I think now you can maybe talk about your most used deck maybe in the past.
Um,
What is the reason for not the downfall? It's still a really good deck, but the move down the step in the tier list.
yeah, I think the reason is pretty simple. Like I talked about it earlier with other decks before, when we talked about the tier 2 decks, which I called the Phobos syndrome. That basically the deck is so well versed against the whole field, aside from like the 2 best decks which you see above.
Mm,
You can definitely deck build to beat those, but it's really, really difficult to build a deck that has a chance against both. So I think the best performing Phobos lists will be the ones that like focus on beating either Fortress
mm,
or FN Rush, and then you just hope to see the matchup that you prepared for
mm,
and like get get the win there. But it's almost impossible. Not entirely impossible, but it's very hard to adapt Phobos to beat both, and that's just yeah the reality. That it's not bad. It's a very good deck. Like it competes with everything else and can compete with either of the top 2 decks. But yeah, beating both is pretty rough.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And it didn't move down 1 step, it moved down 2 steps. It moved behind Hydro Hurricane even. And maybe we will see like this change in the future. I'm not sure, but I don't believe that it will move up to tier 1 again, just because like the tier 1 decks are just too good at what they are doing. And as you said, it's hard to beat both at the same time. So but I still think like Phobos has some potential with some more rebirths, for example, and Ice Vapor, which can be
Yeah.
good against Fortress, but still it has problems against FN Rushdown. So um, and yeah, it's moving behind Hydro Hurricane because in our latest IDCs or in the last cycle we saw a huge success in Hydro Hurricane. It's definitely popular. More people are picking up the deck, and especially the Chimera version, which was popularized by Claude Alpha, has been like I think the standard version
Yeah.
at the moment, and there are also some there are only some small um, problems like how many copies are you playing? Are you playing like 3 or 4 Gigaslugs, for example? But I think the Chimera package is there to stay, and there's only like how many copies are you playing of the cards. That's the only thing that's left. And again, it's really strong in adapting. So the same with FN Ruck goes for Hydro Hurricane. If you want to prepare more for control for Fortress, you can put in more Ice Vapors, for example. If you want to prepare more against Rush, you can put in more blockers without like hurting your deck. So if you put in like more Leur Giga Meru-Ooze, you get more like 1 mana draw a card cards with Rias together. So I think, and also like more bounces with Hydro Hurricane. So I think the deck functions really, really well, and with some high roll potential if you play like Giga Slug into Giga Balsa and then evolve your Giga Slug into Giga Salt, tap 2, discard 2, you discard 3 cards from the opponent. So and can do that like turn by turn by turn. You can attack one, tap the other darkness creature, the opponent discards the card he picked up from the shield, so it gets like really um, like a lockdown type of deck. So it's really, really good at what it does.
Yeah, I think you already said one of the main points, that it's really popular. I'm like not sure if Phobos is like much worse than Hydro Hurricane or even better. They are pretty close to each other in power level. But like recently in the last IDC cycle, like Hydro Hurricane was just way more popular and way more played, and therefore also saw more success. So yeah, at the moment we have this ranking in tier 1.5, but that could maybe change, and depending on how the future unfolds, maybe some of the top tier 2 decks might move up. Yeah, that's still to be seen, but for the time being, we have this ranking.
No. So going through the last 2 decks of the tier list, and when we talked first about like the tier list, we were deciding what is like the best deck in at the moment in our opinion, and this was like I think 2 months ago where we first talked about the tier list, and there was like we said there was like no order, like both decks are like equally good, but there's still like I think the last IDC win, or the last 2 IDC wins even, was by FN Rush, so that like took over. So FN Rush is moving up like the one spot as like the best deck, or the deck to beat like at the moment.
Yeah, it's definitely the like how is it called, the villain of the state. I don't public enemy number one. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's performing the best. It has the best results. It's simple, but it's also at the same time like very good. So very like in theory, it's easy, quote unquote, easy to beat, but you have to like build your deck in a very suboptimal way to do that. Like that's the whole crux of it, that you can beat it, but you will make your deck infinitely worse into everything else
Yeah.
while you try to beat it.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the thing is when you like are focusing to beat FN Rush, and the first thing which comes to mind is like add some burst shots in your deck or Magma Rex, for example. But then you look at like the other decks, and burst shot is like not doing anything against like the other like pretty much 6 or 7 decks which comes next in the tier list. Even like Rock Aggro can like um, don't really care that much about burst shots, or Gontai Quixotic can dodge it, and then Blossom Tribe and Aquahulkers already like gain value. For example, like the Light Water Azonius, like only Amul and Hulkus are dying, and Belix and Magrus and also all the other stuff are and Zurion are surviving burst shots, so it's only like maybe good against the water nature aggro or water fire aggro. So you basically are putting a card in your deck which is good against FN Rush but bad against like 6, 7, 8 other decks which are really good and popular at the moment. So you're kinda maybe I don't add like 4 copies, maybe I only add like 2 copies or maybe not at all and hope to dodge FN Rush, and then 7 people are showing up with FN Rush and you are like, well, or maybe you are putting 4 burst hits in your deck and then you only face like Hydro Hurricane and Phobos and Fortress, and that's why it's like really, really good. Meanwhile, when you put an Ice Vape in your deck against Fortress, it's also good against like Phobos, it's also good against Ruby Deckout, it's also good against like whatever, and maybe even Hydro Hurricane, although like a bit less. But I think the things that counter like Fortress also counter other control decks, but the thing that counters like FN Rush like don't do much against other like aggro decks which are just slower and have like more beat sticks, more heavy beat sticks than FN Rush.
Yeah, also another point, or maybe even like the last point I have to add to the like discussion of the final ranking we made here is that recently, like Fortress Burn has somewhat gotten an innovation that people try out the 40 card version.
Mm-hmm.
So they just try to be as consistent as possible, cut all like the situational cards, try to focus on your main game plan, and by going down to 40, you also increase your odds of winning against Fire Nature Rush, because like you still keep like the same shield trigger ratio, but also have like a better chance at like the best start against Rush, which is Bronze Arm into Sky Sword. But then at the same time, if you do that, you also make yourself weaker to like the other Fortress players that still play 50. They just beat you. And then like Ruby Deckout also has a easier time beating you when you're at 40.
Yeah.
So that's like the same logic. Even like the second best deck has the same issue as everyone else, that by trying to beat Fire Nature Rush, you leave yourself open to what everyone else is doing then.
Yeah. And FN Rush don't have to change at all and can even like play like one common missile, 0, 2, whatever, like how many Hydro
Yeah.
Hurricanes are you facing, for example. It's also good against some niche decks, like against Wave Striker you can kill an Ezra, for example, with common missile against you can kill some Belix, for example, you can kill Ikas with it. So yeah, if you expect to see those decks, you just put in more common missiles, and just like if not, if you expect more like aggro, you put in like 4 Torcons, and the rest just stays the same. And
Yeah.
that's why it's also like a really, really good deck. It's just consistent at what it does. It's pretty linear. You don't have to like adapt at all. You can play the same version in every IDC and still be like in the top 8 most of the time. So yeah,
Yeah,
really, really strong.
think with Fire Nature Rush we're at a point where not 36 but like 38 cards are completely solved. Like you
Yeah.
always play the 36 that were solved before, and then you always play 2 Torcons because you need the nature mana more, and then
Yeah.
it's just how far do you go down on Comet Missiles? Like
Yeah.
2 if you expect a lot of Hydro Hurricane, 1 if you expect less, and if you say like, nah, I'm not preparing for Hydro, I just want the max consistency of nature mana on turn 1, then just play 4 Torcons.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so that's it for our current tier list, and I think we improve further and further. The more updates we were making, we are cleaning up some decks which are not being played at all. We are summarizing some decks under a shell which are pretty similar. So um, it's a more like it's a cleaner view like on the whole tier list. And still we see tier 2 decks represent general the tier 2 section is represented really, really by really a lot of decks. I think that's why Duel Masters in general is so popular, because there are a lot of decks which can be played at the tournament, which can perform really, really well at the tournament. And all these shells, you can experiment so much with it. And I think, yeah, I think it's still a great game. It will be a great game moving forward, and we were glad that we can host like the monthly tournaments. And if you want to join our tournaments as well, you can write me, Spalding, or you can write Darksigner on Discord. we will leave our Discord names in the bottom in the comments of this video. Just write us, join us. There are a lot of people here. We have this month like 40 people in our tournament, so still a lot of people are playing it. We already have some real life tournaments even, and yeah, this like my my last words. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I agree with all the points. I think the tier list is getting more accurate with like every update, and yeah, I just hope you guys enjoyed viewing this. And yeah, no further comment. I'm happy with it as it is.
Yeah. So see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.
See you.